Alright, everybody, so I was on the Twitter looking around and came across a tweet that stated, an excellent grilling of Steven Pinker by some guy on poverty. So let's have a watch here. For those who don't know, Pinker is definitely on the left, but he also is a pro-free speech and not absolutely anti-West thinker, so obviously progressives hate him. Let's have a listen here.
Well, let's talk about let's take global poverty.
Yeah.
You have a chapter in the book on prosperity. You want to make the case that the world is more prosperous and less poor than ever before, and you point to data showing the number of people living on the extreme poverty line, as defined by the World Bank today at $1.90 a day, is down from 2 billion in 1990 to 700 million in 2015. The world is becoming middle class, you say. But surely you know, I know you know, because you're a very clever, well-qualified guy, that there are numerous studies and a number of scholars who dispute that poverty measure as arbitrary, as inaccurate, that in reality, to quote from a recent academic paper by an anthropologist at the LSE, quote, around 4 billion people remain in poverty today, around 2 billion remain hungry, more than ever before in history.
That completely irrelevant to which way the numbers have gone. Of course, the definition of extreme poverty is going to be arbitrary. If you make it higher, then more people will be in poverty. If you make it lower, fewer people.
Exactly.
But no matter what cutoff you set, the direction is downward.
That's not true. That's
yes,
not,
it is.
If you look at the work done by Jason Hickel at the LSE, if you take a poverty line of $5, 1 billion people have been added to the number of people on that poverty measure since 1981. The trend shows the exact opposite when you move it to $5 a day.
In terms of the proportion of people in poverty by that criteria?
No, the sheer number of people.
Yes,
1 billion people have been added to the poverty total
since
1981.
Yes, but billions of people have been added to the world as a whole. What's relevant is the proportion.
But you also use absolute numbers in your book. You say it's gone down from 2 billion to 700 million.
Well, I note that by at least the most widely accepted definition of extreme poverty, it's interesting that the absolute numbers have declined as well. But the main point is the proportion, because more people have been added, so anything is going to increase.
You say widely accepted, but this is my point. You don't acknowledge in the book, there's no caveats where you say, for example, Professor Lant Pritchett, Harvard colleague of yours, a development economist who studies this stuff, says the poverty line shouldn't be $1.90, it should be $12, $15 a day. And when you make that simple statistical change, the entire picture of
$12 a day is a ludicrous number, by the way. You don't need that much to live in many of these countries. If you have $12 a day in Africa, you can definitely get by, no doubt. So there's another part to this video. I just want to point out, Pinker here is making the argument not that there are necessarily less people who are in poverty, although at the $1.9 a day mark that's what they consider extreme poverty. So there are less people there, but he's not even saying like at $5 a day that there are less people in absolute terms that are in poverty. What he's saying is the proportion of people who are in poverty is less than it was before, and it's going down. And that is definitely true. The data would definitely hold out with that claim. There's another part to this. I'm not sure exactly what's on here, but let's take a look at this too.
changes, and the arguments in your book basically fall apart, do they not?
No, I don't think so. Again, I mean, maybe
statistical change. This is the problem of relying on data. You change the measurement, and everything changes.
Well, no, not everything changes, because I mean, there can be. I mean, that's a rather extreme redefinition. That's multiplying by a factor of 6.
Oh, he's one of the world's experts on the subject.
Well,
you're
yes,
not.
so,
with respect, this is his field. You could have included the caveats and said, look, there's a bunch of experts who don't agree that poverty is falling. You declare it as fact that poverty is falling. Plenty of development experts disagree with you, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, some do, but if it's a question of just absolute numbers, it's irrelevant. If it's a question of whether...
So, I agree. If it's a question of absolute numbers, it's more or less irrelevant. And to illustrate this, I'll say, if you were to pick between two different countries, and one country has 2 billion people in it, and the other country only has 1 million people in it, the country with 2 billion people in it has 500 million people who are in poverty. The country with 1 million people in it has 500,000 in poverty. Which would you rather live in? The country where a quarter of the people are in poverty, or the country where half the people are in poverty? In absolute terms, there's more impoverished people in the larger nation, but if I'm picking where I'm going to go, I don't want to look at it that way. If I'm picking a country to move to, I want to pick where I'm most likely to be successful or rich or whatever. It's the same question. It's like in Canada, Ontario's economy is bigger than Alberta's, but the per capita income in Alberta absolutely outstretches every other province by a large margin. which province would you be more likely to be wealthy in? Alberta or Ontario? Well, just because there's more money in Ontario doesn't mean that you'd rather live there. Also, I mean, if you're looking at it in this kind of state, it's like which country would you rather be born into, especially since you don't have a choice. Like, well, would you rather be born into a country where you're 50% to be impoverished or 25? It's a pretty easy choice. And mentioned in this, there was Jason Hickel. Hickel's argument is basically this. There are more people, in absolute terms, who are impoverished now than there are people who, or than there were 10 years ago. He has absolutely no mention of the fact that the proportion of people who are in poverty has gone down. And he also doesn't seem to care that the proportion of people in poverty has gone down. And he, in this article, actually has a link to this where you can look. So, you can pick which dollar per day amount. We're going to go with 5.5. And what I want to see here is that from 2013, let's look at 2013. The percentage of people who are in under this is going to be right here. So it's head count percentage. 52% of people in Southeast Asia and Pacific are below $5.5 a day. So if poverty is getting worse, this number should be going up, down as we get here. It should be going up through time. But if we look, it's gone up 42 to 48 to 52 to 56 to 63, 71, 76. Okay, so here people are getting less impoverished. 3.2. Let's look at this one. The numbers are going to be lower. 17, 23, 26, 30, 37, 45. At 1.9, again, it's going to be the same thing. So basically, he's linked to something that disproves his own argument in his article here about how the world is becoming so much more impoverished. Interesting. Again, I'll say it like this. So if there was a time in the past where there are less people in poverty, but the percentage of people who are in poverty, let's say half the people were in poverty at one point, or just as examples, let's say half of it was before, and now it's 25. These aren't the actual numbers; these are completely wrong. But let's say it is. So 100 years ago, half the people are born into poverty, and now 25% of the people are born in poverty. When would you choose to be born? It's a really easy question. I would choose to be born now, because the lowest proportion of people ever are now in poverty. It shouldn't be that hard, but as Mr. Hassan here says, when you look at data, you can manipulate them however you want. He's decided to view them in a way that's favorable towards his argument that everything is terrible and that the West is the reason everything is terrible. Okay. I guess you can do that if you want to, but is that really giving you a good look at what the facts are? Not really. When you look at it the different way, in the way I framed it, as in when would you rather be born, when you have a 50% or a 25% chance to be in poverty, it's pretty clear when you'd like to be born. I don't think that's manipulative in any way. This is how we measure income. We don't look at just net income or GDP for a country to see how rich the individual citizens are. We always look at GDP per capita. We always look at income per capita. That is the reasonable and that is the useful statistic. Every economist who actually knows something and is not trying to manipulate you and manipulate your opinion into being something that they want it to be will tell you this. Every single one who is a decent economist knows this. Even Paul Krugman probably knows this. Even Paul. So when he's talking about how the absolute numbers of impoverished people has gone up, big fucking whoop, man. Who cares? I understand it sucks for those people, and that's an argument made by Ramanan in the comments on his Twitter. Is basically, well, tell that to the people who are in poverty now. Okay, I will. I'll go tell them that they have a better chance of getting out of poverty now than they would have ever had before. And I'll ask them, what would you prefer? To be born now, when you have a 25% chance of getting out of poverty, or 100 years ago when you had a 5% chance of getting out of poverty? Yeah, the answer is pretty obvious. You want the best chance to be not in poverty. To you, it shouldn't matter the absolute number of people who are in poverty. All that should matter is how good can my life as an individual be, and how can I maximize the chance of me being not in poverty. That's about it for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.